river systems. So we have a series of reservoirs that have been built to try and manage the flow of water in the Delaware. A lot of people don't realize how managed the Delaware is. It's free flowing, doesn't have a main stem dam, but it is a managed river. And that is to provide a guaranteed source of fresh drinking water for the city of Philadelphia and Trenton. So all of our headwater reservoirs in the Delaware are designed to be able to manage that flow and keep the intrusion of salt water below the intakes of fresh water for Philadelphia and Trenton. So those reservoirs then also provide a supply of clean drinking water to New York City. New York has incredible drinking water because it comes from the Delaware. So it's not unusual for white pines to grow 10, 15, 20 feet taller than the rest of the canopy around them. Well, those white pines were extremely valuable to the early, to the Native Americans here, but also to the early settlers, and then to England. Those countries that were developing a large navy required tall sailing ships, and the masts of those sailing ships were white pines. And that was because they are relatively light for their mass, but they're also very flexible. So when the King of England discovered that North America, northeastern United States, had an abundance of old-growth white pines, he sent his foresters here, and the foresters would brand those trees with the King's brand. So they were reserved for the King of England to be used for masts for tall sailing ships. And the penalty for disturbing one of those trees was obviously death. You were messing with the king's property. So, but those large white pines were cut and were floated down tributaries like the Broadhead here to the Delaware, and then down the Delaware to the shipyards in Philadelphia, where they were used for the masts for tall sailing ships. They have tremendous strength in being flexible, but tremendous strength to be able to be swayed or bent under full sail without snapping. So, and long, tall, straight, very proportionally cylindrical, and just very valuable tree.
Today I did a program on aquatic macroinvertebrates, the invertebrate life in a trout stream. Important because it's the main trout food, and we're talking to fly fishermen, and also because they're environmentally important. They're the main way we evaluate water quality today. I think we're still on the upward curve. I mean, the Clean Streams Law and abatement of acid precipitation has really helped a lot of our waters recover, and we're really in a pretty good situation. We do have some impaired streams right here in the area in Monroe County. We do have a lot of streams in Pennsylvania impaired by acid precipitate or acid mine drainage. So in terms of the balance, in Pennsylvania we've sacrificed a lot to industrial development, and we've sacrificed a lot of water quality. So the balance is still pretty tenuous, but in a lot of cases water quality has improved because of the Clean Streams Law.
So I did, over the course of about 5 years, I researched 101 different scientific explanations, 101 scientific proofs, if you will, that there absolutely has to be a God, or the world couldn't exist and we couldn't exist as we do, as we are. And water, obviously everybody knows that water covers a large percentage of the earth. Every cell in your body needs water. But water has some amazing, amazing properties that you would not expect if you were just studying the elements and the molecules of similar liquids. And so water was just fascinating to me. And I found through a lot of research that water had even more amazing properties than I thought. And so It was a very, very profound experience to understand more about water and how it is absolutely essential for our existence, but also so much a part of our joy in life. To have our relationship with water, because it does so many things for us, and all the oxygen that our body needs is carried by the water and by our blood. Everything is totally dependent every day, every minute on water. So my favorite property of water is that when water freezes and turns to ice, it actually becomes only 1/10 as dense as it was when it was a liquid. And that means that ice floats. So if ever you put ice in a drink, you know it floats. But like in the lake behind me, for example, if the ice froze and then became more dense than the water, it would sink to the bottom. Then another layer of ice would form and sink to the bottom. It would fill up the lake from the bottom up with ice, and all living things in the lake would be killed in the winter times. As it is, because ice floats, it makes a protective layer on the top of the lake, which protects all the fish and all the other life in the lake. It also, when cold water goes down, warm water goes up, which creates this cycle of motion, currents in the lakes, which turns over the oxygen and helps all the wildlife in the lake, all the wildlife that depends on that lake. So those kind of simple things. The water cycle of the earth, people are familiar, most people in grade school study that water evaporates from the oceans, it goes up and gets purified, turns into clouds, and then comes back down again, goes in the rivers, goes to the ocean. This amazing cycle over and over every day allows for us to exist. Without that, there would be no existence. All living things on the earth would die. So this is not an accident. There's no way.
I grew up in Philadelphia, so by the Delaware River. And, I've often thought, the city of Philadelphia is really there because of the Delaware River, not the other way around. The Delaware River doesn't exist there because the city of Philadelphia is there, even though that's what maybe a lot of people think, that live in the city. The city exists because of the river. Water is really a great mythic theme, like it figures in mythology and in religious traditions very much. I remember reading, for example, in April 2010, National Geographic did an entire issue on water, on the subject of water. And they were interviewing this Buddhist fellow in Tibet, and they were saying, what do you think is the problem behind the world water issue? And he said, his answer fascinated me. He said that I think the principal problem is that we actually think of water as only a material resource. We only think of it in materialistic terms. And I think that ties in with the mythological sense. Because again, water has been a major theme in all world mythologies and religions. Of life, I sat and wept by the waters of Babylon. You could go by the shores of Gitchigumi. It appears really everywhere, almost unconsciously. You think of the issue of a thing like baptism, which is, a central theme in Judeo-Christianity. Baptism, immersing yourself in water before being reborn. That actually not only is a Judeo-Christian theme, it figures in every world mythology of going back into the water, like going into the waters of the womb, the world womb. Finnish mythology, you have the double water birth of Vainamoinen, the great hero of the Kalevala, the Finnish epic. You could go on and on. Every mythology has this idea of water and rebirth, of going back into the waters of life and being reborn and re-emerging as a different person or a new man. a woman. That's another aspect. We have it, but it's sort of trivialized. It's not considered essential wisdom for life. One that comes to mind, just offhand, is a popular American folk song, Shenandoah. There's the Shenandoah River. It's kind of associated with the river as well as other things. But this idea of going out to find a new world. Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, away, across the wide Missouri. Like this idea of a beckoning land, a beckoning unknown, unexplored land. That's actually a very mythological image, which was connected with the founding and the settling of the American continent. So that folk song is actually expressing something mythological that's in our psyche about this, something Americans have always been very invested in, even into the space age, this idea of the exploration of a new world and this kind of mythic beckoning connected with a river, the Shenandoah. When you acknowledge the river below the river, I think this entails an attitude of respect, where the river is not just a resource, it's not just a sewer to dump your industrial waste and stuff into. When you think about the waters in purely materialistic terms, that actually entails a kind of abuse. Already when you take out that mythological, psychic, spiritual dimension, you're already on the way to abuse of the river and of the waters. And since, the planet is determined by water, that's abuse of life already in that attitude, before the actual physical abuse of the river. And it's very subtle in a way, because it sounds like good pragmatism. The river is just a resource. It's just a physical resource that we use as we see fit. We use it to swim in, or to fish in, or again as a sewer, as a dump. But it's only in pragmatic terms.
Here we are in a beautiful location within the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. The park is managed by the National Park Service, and it straddles the Delaware River, Pennsylvania on one side, and the other side is New Jersey. I, as a local resident, called resident artist, was able to spend an extended period of time here and really get a lot out of the experience. Where in a lot of national parks they may get artists for several weeks, I was able to spend a whole year here. I love this park. I have great gratitude for the National Park Service and this park here, because it allows the public to come to these beautiful places. The waterfalls and the creeks are not privately owned, as is the case in a lot of the areas around here. You can't get to the waterfalls because they're on private property, but within the park, the public is able to enjoy these beautiful places. But I really came to understand as resident through getting to be friends with local historians, people who have lived here for many generations, and a lot of reading, I came to appreciate that there was a tremendous amount of sorrow that led to the creation of the park. People who lived here did not want to leave, but they were forced to leave because of a project called the Tox Island Dam Project, which never came to fruition, but the people already had been evacuated. When I'm here, I can feel a great sense of joy that they had in living in such a beautiful, remarkable place, and I get a deep sense of sorrow that they must have felt to have to leave here. And what we now have as a treasure to us came at a great cost to a lot of people.
The other thing I like about painting is that it kind of allows me to disengage with myself and get involved in something else. And what I mean by that is when I'm free, when I'm not thinking, when I don't have any ego, and I'm just painting, it just flows. Just paint comes off the brush. And that's kind of why I like to paint water, and we'll go into that. And I'll also touch upon the flow as well. I find when you're doing something like that, when you're disengaged and you're not in touch with it in a way, you're in touch with it in a different way, kind of in an eternal way. You're kind of in another realm. You're outside yourself, and you're playing with the unseen maybe, and what the other aspects of life in the world in which we don't see. So there's a certain kind of, freedom when I paint. Flow and motion in water, especially patterns of water, and achieving rain, the feeling of rain, in just the most minimalistic way of portraying it. I love George Inness. If I was to point to one artist that I really love, it's George Inness. And what I like about Inness is how he started off as a traditional landscape painter, but then as he progressed through his work and he progressed through his life, he was after something more. And he was trying to break through that veil of nature into that other realm, kind of what I was talking about before. You know, looking beyond and going into that unknown period and the unseen, the spiritual realm that is also around us.
So this is an essay from The Gift of Rivers called Drought. The river has come back to fit between its banks. To stick your hands into the river is to feel the chords that bind the earth together in one piece. The sound of it at a distance is like wild horses in a canyon, going sure-footed away from the smell of a cougar, come to them faintly on the wind. My favorite part of Siddhartha, I think, is when he begins to study with Vasudeva. And I really enjoyed the fact that Vasudeva just listened to the river. He would sit and listen to the river, and suspicious of words, he didn't talk very much. But the book talks about how Siddhartha was then trying to study with Vasudeva. And at one point, Vasudeva finally decided that he was going to die because he had reached nirvana in his own humble way. I mean, he was a ferryman. So Siddhartha was sitting by the river, and it occurred to him that all the sounds that a human makes exist in the river. From the sounds that we make when we're a small baby crying out, or a child, and then we grow and we're young and brash and we're making our sounds in that time, and then we grow old and we have struggles and suffering, and all of the particular sounds that we make in every different life, not just my life or your life, exist in the river. And then they all blend together into one sound that is the river. And that was sort of the end, and that was when Siddhartha found enlightenment along the river.
He grew up in Hannibal, Missouri, which is a small town right on the banks of the Mississippi. The town that he uses in Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer is St. Petersburg, which is on the banks of the Mississippi in Missouri. Some of the landscape and setting that he describes are straight out of that location. So his experiences along the banks of the Mississippi gave him, instructed him about life. As a matter of fact, I think the information that he gained from life and the parallels and metaphors that he uses for life being, for the river being the journey of life, or seeing how the river comes alive, in a person and in their experiences, in their interactions with nature and with other people, and even, I suppose, changes that occurred. I mentioned that earlier, and appreciation, a place to sort of find solitude. All of those things are part of, I think, are part of what framed Mark Twain's perspective about life. Again, as an educator, when I see students who have no affiliation with the natural world or with rivers specifically, have had no experience, they've never been on it in a boat, they've never fished, they've never visited a local state park or national park that has water in it, rivers flowing through it, are at a severe disadvantage in understanding their meaning themselves, their relationship with nature, with the world, and with other people, and how important and valuable rivers are in history and in the development of civilization and in a person's aesthetic appreciation of the natural world.